We have no agenda changes this evening, and so with that, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Crosby? Here. Fellers?
Here.
Badusha?
Here.
Burl?
Present.
Floral?
Present.
Hoffman?
Present.
Jury?
Present.
Kelly?
Here.
McDonald?
Present.
Nicolosi?
Here.
Red? Delgado?
Present.
Schultz?
Here.
Tassoni?
Present.
Webster?
Here.
Westcott?
Present.
Wilson?
Present.
Biondo?
Present.
Booker?
Present.
Boomer? 18 present, 2 absent.
Thank you, Clerk Mullins, and with that, we will go to the invocation. I'll have you stand, and I'll turn things over to Mr. Salgado.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Heavenly Father, we ask that you watch over and protect our firefighters, police officers, our county staff members as they serve the needs of the county. Heavenly Father, we ask that you protect our troops as they protect our country and freedom. Heavenly Father, we ask that you grant us the knowledge and wisdom to serve our communities effectively. We ask that you give us the strength to make the right decisions for our communities. Heavenly Father, we ask that you bless each and every county board member and their families as we continue to do your will. We give you thanks and praise who lives and reigns now and forever and ever. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Our first item of business under presentations, I wanted to give Jay Sandine, the new Executive Director of the Park District, an opportunity to introduce himself. I know he knows many of the folks on the board, and the Park District and the county have a long-term relationship that I know he's committed to seeing go forward in a positive manner. So with that, Mr. Sandine, I'll have you come on up here. And congratulations and thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Chairman. All right, good evening. Thank you for letting me come in tonight, Chairman. And I just wanted to take a couple quick minutes and first off, introduce myself. As Frank said, my name's Jay Sandine. I've been a part of your Park District for 22 years and started as a young kid, 19 years old, and actually a third generation Park and Rec. My grandfather, as Mr. Jury knows, was Jasper Giacconi. He was the first superintendent at Rock Cut State Park in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And he got my dad, after he tried to pay him off not to marry his daughter, in the parks business after they got married. And he ran Shabana Lake State Park, which I was 1 year old when he moved us down to Shabana. So I got the privilege of growing up and learning from my father and my grandfather in the world of public service. And it was an incredible background and everything. My dad passed away when I was 18. Mom and I moved up to Rockford, and that's when I fell into the Rockford Park District as a 19-year-old kid. And 22 years later, we're here today, and I couldn't be more blessed and happy to serve in this capacity. The reason why I wanted to come tonight was not to just introduce myself, but I really wanted to make sure and say thank you to the Winnebago County Board. We have had a great relationship with the county board, and I want to let you know tonight that the Park District is committed to that and really taking that to the next level. What you guys have done for this community is unparalleled. We've seen some great things, with your participation and support of the Nicholas Conservatory. We have an exhibit right now, Bruce Monroe exhibit. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to go down. A world-renowned light artist, and there's people literally coming from all over the world coming to Nicholas Conservatory and watching that exhibit, which is just phenomenal. Your support of Reclaiming First is immeasurable. Last weekend we had a girls' soccer tournament, and literally people are staying in Elgin hotels last weekend because there's nothing available in hotels in our county or in our area. That was the closest available room was Janesville and Elgin. So amazing. I'm here tonight to say thank you for your support of Levings Lake. I wish Dorothy was here. Miss Red has been a champion of this project from the first time I called her in 2014. That year, the county stepped up and supported with $15,000 of host fees. The city, Alderman Hervey, matched that 15. The Park District put in 15. and a young guy named Dan Jarrett invested $250,000 of his own dollars, him and his team, to bring West Rock Wake Park to Southwest Rockford. Since that time in 2014, guys, there are literally people coming from all over the country to Levings and Southwest Rockford. I came back to this group led by Dorothy. Fred helped, Elsie helped, everyone in here supported this past year, and the county gave $30,000. Veneta at the city matched that, the Park District matched it, and Dan is right now putting in $500,000, him and his team, to make that a full expansion of that wake park, and it will literally be a national draw. So I would say that's one heck of an ROI, but from your start of that, we wouldn't have been able to do it without you. At the beginning of June, we had a little group in town called ShareFest. Has anyone heard of them? 3,000 people came to Levings in 9 days and completely renovated that entire park. It was absolutely staggering. What they did, the best part about it was not just rebuilding the park, but they are really rebuilding unity and spirit of collaboration in this town. For the first time, there's a lot of people going to Levings and Southwest that have never been there before. There's a lot of people in Southwest and Levings welcoming people that they've maybe never seen before. It's a huge unity driver, and it would not have happened if you guys didn't start this with that $30,000 commitment, okay? What I would like to give tonight, one to the chairman on behalf of his entire staff at the county, and then I've got one for Miss Red, maybe Julia, you can give it to her. But a part of that 9 days of volunteer effort of ShareFest, the volunteers took down 270 ash trees that were destroyed by that emerald ash borer. 270 trees in 9 days. We had a young staff, a guy named Taylor Hanley, come up with an idea, and he sliced some of those 270 ash trees and made this plaque, and it says, "Thank you for meeting me at Levings, Rockford Park District ShareFest 2017. So there's literally blood, sweat, and tears in this plaque that I'm giving you tonight, and we could not do it without you. So on behalf of your park district, I want to say thank you for everything that you've done at the county, and I'm really excited to continue that collaboration in the future. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman. Jay, I want to thank you for your dedication for the service that you gave the Rockford Park District, but also I know that you have the credentials to carry that on for the Park District. We wish you the best, and we're there still to help you when you need it. Thank you.
You're here. Said, well said. Thank you, Mr. Sandin. Thank you, Mr. Jury. The next item of business is our approval of minutes. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes from June 8th and to lay over the minutes from June 22nd. I have a motion by Mr. Jury and a second by Mr. Nicolosi. Any questions on the minutes before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, minutes approved. Thank you. Next item of business, announcements and communications. Clerk Mullins.
The items listed below were received as correspondence.
And we will place those on file. Thank you, Clerk Mullins. Next item of business, board member correspondence. Any comments by board members? Mr. Wilson.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Booker Fest starts tomorrow and it goes through Sunday. It's at 1005 South Court Street here in Rockford. Tomorrow night there's jazz, freestyle bands, The Flames, Amy, Avery, whoever that is. And it's $15 per person. Saturday, out at Marinelli Field, the community versus policemen in softball game. I took part in it last year, but I was an umpire. And Sunday there'll be a gospel fest, and that's free. And I'm inviting everybody in here if you'd like, if you don't have anything else to do, to show up for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Gorel.
Since we are talking about Southwest Rockford, it was really a pleasure for me to sit in the audience when they did the dedication of the Genestra building. And that was fantastic. Yeah, Elsie was there, the chairman was there. We did donate money to that so that they could purchase that building. We were one of those that jumped right in there on that museum. And so that's quite a campus that's going to be down there on South Main. If you haven't been through the ethnic heritage building, you might want to do it because all of us came from someplace and you're going to find that your heritage is in that building. And it goes way back and then go through the Genestra building too. It's a wonderful place to visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Goral. Thank you. Mr. Booker?
Thank you, Chairman. The other morning, I found a Booker's Best sign in my yard.
You want me to come get it?
I left it there for a couple of days, and I've placed it at Cunningham and Meridian, and I would get better exposure there.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Mr. Westcott?
Yes, while we're on the subject of the Rockford Park District, I want to thank Tim Dimke for his years of service that he gave to this community. He had some big shoes to follow with Webb's Norman, and now Jay's got them. That's what I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott. I agree. Mr. Fellers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, today I want to say I had the pleasure of meeting Jay and was invited to the dedication of the new top play area at Sinisky Park. For those that haven't seen it yet, it is just south of the symbol and fills in a much needed area with a play area for kids and what's been a desert for, since I was a tot running up and down that bike path. So if you get a chance, definitely come out and take a look. It's done with a grant of $150,000 from the Kiwanis Club of Rockford, and it's truly a beautiful facility. On a personal note, on Saturday begins the 109th running of the Chicago Mackinac Race. There will be 2,500 sailors from 621 different cities, 38 states, and 12 countries racing 333 miles from Chicago to Mackinac Island, including myself for the 5th time. I would ask that you put all of us, all 2,500, in your prayers as we are on the water for 3 to 4 days, trying to get there as fast as we can.
Safe travels. Mr. Fellers, any other comments by board members? Thank you. Seeing none, just a quick 2 comments under the chairman's report. I want to give a shout out to Chris Dornbush and the Planning and Developing Department. So where he's at this year on revenue, dollars brought in through his department through fee collection, he has matched with 3 months to go in our fiscal year what he did all of last year. And it's really twofold. One is that we had the bad hail and the roof issues related to some weather. But 2 is he's commented before, and it's worth noting, is we've had a bunch of new development in the county. And that is good, and I just appreciate the efforts of his department. But it's good that we're ahead year to date on the revenue projection in his department too. So thank you for all your hard work, Chris. Appreciate it. Yes, Mrs. Goral.
Let me also tag on to it. We have to thank the board because you allowed them to raise the fees. In order to raise the fees, they also had to do a study on it. And that study didn't cost us anything because they did it themselves and came up with a good suggestion for what the new fees should have been. Too many times we hire in people who are supposed to be professionals in doing this to give us advice when we have it right here in our own departments. So we need to thank them for helping us get there.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Goral. Appreciate your comments. The last item, Mr. Webster and I went to the Durand the Durand City Council meeting the other night and met with their new village president and their board, and I appreciated the opportunity to introduce myself as the new chairman, and also appreciated Mr. Webster's words. One of the ways in which we're helping one of our partners is we've connected them to a grant opportunity. They have some sidewalk issues in their downtown, and it doesn't mean they'll get the money, it just means we're connecting them to an outside source that might lead to some funds down the road. So Impressed with their new village president, and it was great to be hosted by their board, so appreciated that opportunity. With that, our next item of business is our consent agenda. With that, I'd entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda. I have a motion by Mr. Hoffman and a second by Mr. Fellers and Mr. Jury and Mr. Nicolosi. Any questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. Thank you very much. Next item of business, Finance Committee, Mr. Biondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance Committee report. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution authorizing payments from the Public Safety Sales Tax Funded Alternative Programs Fiscal Year 2017 budget line item, and it doesn't include the $50,000 that we amended out of it.
I have a motion by Mr. Biondo. I have a second by Mr. Jury and Mr. Gorel. Any questions by board members on the resolution before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. Oh, excuse me, no, Mr. Schultz is a no. Motion passes. Mr. Biondo.
That concludes our report.
I'm going to go to Carla and a quick comment, if that's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to update you on the impact of the state budget as we know it on counties. I was on a call with several county CFOs today, and we kind of kicked around what we thought the state budget meant to us. For fiscal year 18, the state's fiscal year 18, our local government distributed fund, which is our income tax, is going to be decreased by 10%. They're trying to spin it that since they're accelerating 2 payments to us, that we're actually going to be whole, but that's not true. We'll still have the same revenue that we normally would. We just would have an increased cash flow. And then one of the things that's going to negatively impact us is they're going to charge an administrative fee on certain revenues that they collect and distribute. And unfortunately, our public safety sales tax is going to be hit by that. And when you take $27 million times 2%, that's a big number that's going to impact our budget for this fiscal year. The motor fuel tax was fully appropriated, and they're going to fund any construction that's funded with motor fuel tax. And then fortunately the 2% reduction doesn't affect our sales tax, our 1.25% sales tax. And then the impact on the replacement tax, the CPPRT, is not really known at this time. They're saying the dollar amount that's going to be diverted, but we don't really know if that's going to impact us the same as last year or if it's going to be a further reduction. But we're planning another call in 2 weeks to kind of gather our thoughts again, and I'll update you at that time.
Thank you, Carla.
So they're going to take $540,000 out of that.
Out of the 1%.
Yeah.
Correct.
Wow. Thank you. I don't know. No thanks.
And the income tax will be about the same dollar amount. Maybe close to 600,000, but
So
income tax continues to go down, and I think it's probably based on a lot of the businesses and families leaving the state.
So the city of Rockford went from a projected $6 million to $8 million deficit overnight because of the state budget. They took a $2 million hit, and it sounds like we're taking about $1 million hit, maybe a little more, with a few unknowns left to factor in. So just to quantify what that means to us.
That really concludes our report.
Next item of business, zoning committee, Mr. Webster. I look forward to the days when our CFO gives us positive news on the financial side. Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. The zoning committee has 4 items on the agenda this evening. They were read in our prior meeting. The first one is special use permit SU 0417, and that comes to you with unanimous approval from both ZBA and zoning committee. And this comes with conditions, and I would move to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Webster. I have a second by Mr. Booker. Mr. Crosby, Mrs. Crosby, and Mrs. Gorel. Sorry, Gene.
Welcome to the club.
I've made the same mistake the other way, so now we're even. Any questions by board members on the item before us this evening? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. The next one we have on our agenda here is V0217, and that was a variance to reduce the driveway width. Now, that one failed at the zoning board of appeals, but then when it came to the zoning committee, we looked over what they did and we addressed the issues that they had with the safety concerns, and we tweaked the conditions. We amended them, and so that came out of zoning committee with approval, with unanimous approval. And so the thing with this is that because the ZBA denied, this causes us to go to a majority vote of 15 members. And zoning committee we didn't have a problem with it after we addressed the safety issues, and I hope you feel the same way. So it does come with amended conditions. Thank you. And I move to approve.
So we have a motion by Mr. Webster, a second by Mr. Kelly, Mr. Westcott, Mrs. Crosby, Mr. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel. I want to thank Mr. Webster for his leadership on this. I think this is an example of government finding a way to work with a resident, not finding a way not to in a responsible manner. So thank you for your leadership on that. Any other questions? Yes, sir, Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually just wanted to echo your statements. The chairman did a fantastic job coming up with a creative solution to address the safety issues, and I would urge every board member to approve this variance.
Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you all. Okay. The last two items are tied at the hip there. They're from the same applicant. There's a map amendment to rezone 3.25 from rural ag to ag. And on the transverse side, they want to rezone 5 acres from ag to rural ag. They're kind of swapping pieces. Same applicant. And zoning got approved unanimously on both of these items from both ZBA and committee. And so once again, I think we could take both of these together, and I would move to approve Z1017 and Z1117.
I got a motion to approve items C and D together by Mr. Webster. I got a second by Mr. Wilson, Mr. Fellers, Mr. Booker, and Mr. Kelly. Any discussion by board members on the item before us? Items C and D before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? C and D passes. Mr. Webster.
Thank you very much. Good job. A little follow-up on what you mentioned earlier about what's happening with Chris Warnbush in their department over there. You know, it wasn't very long ago where I had months that would go by where we had no report from zoning. Some of you remember that. And because we were in the doldrums, we had nothing going on. We were dead in the water. And then a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I think, then we started getting a little uptick there. And so occasionally then we had 2 items on the agenda maybe, and then we had maybe 3. And a lot of those were, as I reminded you before, business-related decisions. Well, now we're starting to see more of a mixed bag, and we're starting to see, as a couple of these are, residential requests and so forth. So I think that bodes well for us, and part of that application, of course, comes with permitting fees as well. And so the more zoning permits we issue, the more it's coming into the coffers in that department over there. And the other issue there about the department Chris runs there is that it's about half the staff of what it was a few years ago. And so they're doing so much more with only half the people there. So now your zoning department basically consists of Chris and Troy and Ashley Spore. And, you know, that's a lot of work for what they do, and I can't think of enough. Good job. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Next item of business, we have the Economic Development Committee, Mr. Westcott.
Thank you, Chairman. We have no report. Promises are that we're going to have some stuff to do pretty soon.
Stay tuned. Thank you, Mr. Westcott. Next item of business, Operations Administrative Committee, Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. Your Operation Administrative Committee has a resolution awarding proposal for Illinois government representation, and I move for its adoption.
I got a motion to approve by Mr. Jury. I got a second by Mr. Westcott, Mrs. Crosby, and Mr. Fellers. Any discussion on the item before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. We have a no vote by Mr. Schultz. Item passes. Mr. Jury.
Thank you. The next resolution, or resolution we have is a resolution awarding bids for the circuit clerk remodeling, and I'd like to speak to this for a moment. Sure. Thank you. This is another mandate by the state of Illinois, and you all know how I feel about mandates. None of the fees are coming out of the county coffers, so to speak. They're coming out of their document storage fees. So I want to congratulate Mr. Klein and Mr. Lawson for their ability to come up with the unique financing of this in the tune of $95,473. And thank you to all the legislators in Illinois that passed this burden on to us. I move for its adoption.
I have a motion by Mr. Jury. I'm looking for a second. Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Westcott, Mrs. Gorel. Any questions on the item before us? Before we take the vote, I just want to wish Mr. Klein a speedy recovery. I think he took a spill and he's recovering here the next few weeks, so wish him well. But
Wish him well, because I know what he was going through, because I had the same thing happen to me several years ago, and it's not a very comfortable situation.
Seeing no hands up here on questions by board members, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Jury.
Thank you. That concludes our report. I do have a comment for the Public Works section. David, you might want to ask we take all those at once if there's no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. Next item of business, and it's a long one, Public Works Committee, Mr. Kelly.
We'll move it along, just don't ask questions. Our first resolution is awarding a bid for bollard with LED lights. This is for the new bike path that we're building on the north side of Midway Village. I'll move its adoption.
We have a motion by Mr. Kelly, a second by Mr. Webster, Mr. Nicolosi, and Mr. Girl. Any questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
Next resolution is awarding a bid for a chip spreader, significantly below the estimated cost, and I move its adoption.
Got a motion by Mr. Kelly, and I have a second by Mr. Westcott, Mr. Webster, and Mr. Girl. Any questions by board members? Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kelly, is this the new spreader that we're purchasing?
This is a new machine, the old, 30 years old, I believe Joe said it was, and just where you can't get parts for it anymore or anything.
What's the lifespan? We expect it to be another 30
No,
years.
the last one lasted 30 years.
Okay, I'm just asking, because I mean, we're talking $160,000. And then, did anyone look at possibly buying a used one, just, at a lower price?
You never know what you're getting.
Okay. My questions?
Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Any other questions by board members on the item before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
Next resolution is authorizing the execution of a construction engineering services agreement for the replacement of Sumner Road Bridge over Sumner Creek, and I move its adoption.
A motion by Mr. Kelly and a second by Mr. Westcott. Any discussion by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
Next resolution is for additional appropriation of motor fuel tax funds for maintenance of traffic signals on the county highway system, and I move its adoption.
Motion by Mr. Kelly. Looking for a second. Mr. Webster. Any comments by board members? Yes, sir. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the resolution itself. It talks about how the original contract was awarded for maintenance of traffic signals in November of 2014. And at the time of the award, it was $325,000 to pay for maintenance and repairs, and the streetlights with an additional $100,000 appropriated in July of 2016. And now we have an additional $400,000, so we've spent $425,000 so far in the first two installments. And I'm trying to understand the nature of this contract. Is it that we intend for them on an ongoing basis to maintain and repair our traffic signals? So the $400,000 is going to be followed by an additional sum, in the near future? Or I'm trying to understand the relationship with Engel Electric.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I'm going to go to Joe for a quick explanation, and then if Mr. Kelly wants to add anything.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are excellent questions, Mr. Schultz. The agreement that we have with Engel Electric is one in which is a 2-year agreement, and it was renewed for 2 years. And our traffic signal maintenance costs between $150,000 and $200,000 a year, depending upon any unusual incidents that we have where we might have to replace things, people hitting traffic poles and things like that. And so we have spent probably close to $425,000. What this paperwork is, you're not approving spending more money. It's a housekeeping item to be able to use the money that we have to spend, being able to use MFT funds for that.
So we anticipate that we're going to have an additional request for funds in the near future.
It's an ongoing thing. They're up here on a regular basis maintaining their traffic signals. Lights go out. Let's see, it was last week or 2 weeks ago where the signals at Perryville and Spring Creek were not working. We had a power outage, and then they had to bring them back on. They were up for that, so it's ongoing. And again, we spend about $150,000 to $200,000 a year.
And then at some point, will we ever evaluate the relationship with Engel Electric and possibly put it out for bid?
Yes, once this second round of this contract, we did a contract that lasts for 2 years, and we renewed it again, and then we're going to go back out to bid, I believe at the end of 2018, if my memory serves me well, and we'll rebid it again. And just to give you a sense of comfort, we were spending more money when we used to do it with another company, I won't name them, but we were used to do it through another private company. We were spending more money. We ended up going to the city of Rockford. They could not, and we saved money there, but they could not continue to maintain it because of staff reductions. So we went out to bid, and Engel was a low bidder at the time.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any other questions by board members on the item before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
Next resolution is authorizing modification number 1 to the agreement between the County of Winnebago and the Village of Winnebago to operate and manage the county's water system located near Baxter Road 990, and I'll move its adoption.
We have a motion by Mr. Kelly. I'm looking for a second. Mr. Webster, Mr. Tassoni. Any questions by board members on the item before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
Next resolution is authorizing the award of a bid for Riverside Boulevard and Newburgh Road HMI pavement removal and replacement, and for the appropriation of motor fuel tax funds. I'll move its adoption.
Got a motion by Mr. Kelly and a second by Mr. Gurl. Any questions? And Mr. Webster. Any questions by board members? Yes, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did we end up with a price? There were no prices on here.
That came out, that bid was open subsequent to our last Public Works meeting. It was, I forget what date this was open. It was either
I'm going to go to Joe for a
Monday,
July 10th.
Monday. And the amount is $29,700.
29.7. Joe, if I could go to you for a second.
Chairman, are we on item G?
Yes.
And item G is the bid for Riverside Boulevard, and that is in the amount of $318,714.96.
Could you repeat that number?
$318,714.96, and the low bidder is William Charles. And the next three items that you see, in fact, the next four, but the next three items that you see, the bids are much lower than what we anticipated. And the bids are just coming in so low right now, and I'm very happy for the county on that basis, but we have to rethink how we're estimating our jobs. So.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Mr. Kelly, anything you'd like to add to that?
My bad on the wrong resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
Now it's the resolution award, authorizing the award of a bid for Belvedere Road crack sealing of HMA pavement, and I'll move its adoption, and that's the 29-7.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. With a motion and a second by Mr. Jury and Mr. Girl, any questions by board members on the item before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
Next resolution, authorizing the award of bid and execution of a construction engineering services agreement for the widening and resurfacing of Baxter Road at Lindenwood Road and Lindenwood Road south of Baxter Road. This is all to accommodate the new entrance to the landfill, and I'll move its adoption.
Motion by Mr. Kelly and a second by Mr. Westcott and Mr. Girl. Any questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
And finally, our last resolution, authorize a resolution awarding quotes for supplying electricity for county traffic signals and dawn to dusk highway lighting, and I'll move its adoption.
I have a motion by Mr. Kelly and a second by Mr. Jury and Mr. Webster. Any comments by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Kelly.
That finally concludes my report.
Oh, Mr. Webster, I apologize.
Yeah, thank you, John. I would appreciate there if we could hear for a moment, or we had our committee meeting tonight for Public Works, and I saw Joe in a state I could only describe as almost giddy about the low prices that we've been getting on these contracts. Joe was astonished about how low most of these came in, and he told us, I think we were as well. And then if you could just give us a little capsule there, Joe, about how much lower the bids have been coming in. And then also, I would like to give Ann kudos for this last resolution on there about supplying electricity for traffic signals. And if Ann could weigh in on that as well, and what she has found for us that is also going to save us a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I'll go to Joe first.
Well, the first bid that we had talked about was the one on Riverside Newburgh. It came in at $318,000, and we thought it was going to be closer to $500,000. And that, if you remember, we had a budget amendment. That's the Riverside was the one that we ground off during the wintertime, and we came back, we found money in our budget. We're just shifting work around, but we maintained our budget and found some money, and we thought it was going to be closer to $500,000, and so we were surprised by that. And then the crack sealing program, we thought was going to be around $50,000. That came into $29,000. And then this last one, which is really interesting from my standpoint, it came in about 45% of what we thought it was going to be. And just to describe my surprise, our consultant did the estimate, we reviewed the estimate, the state of Illinois reviewed the estimate, and so we all thought it was a fairly good estimate. We're still at about 45% of what we thought it was going to be. So, it's just so unusual. I'm not sure what's happening. I have to kind of figure this out and think it through. But at any rate, we're getting great prices, and I wish I had $10 million to recycle some more roads. So.
I'm going to go to Mr. Jury, and then I'm going to come back to Ann, if that's okay. Mr. Jury?
Joe, I want to thank you for the crack sealing, because that's an advocate of that. We have not done that to our roads that is going to save us some money. That is proof of the pudding. I know it, you know it. That will make our roads last a lot longer. And I think we should have been doing this long ago. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. I'll go to Ann.
Yes, what we've been working on is trying to get all our electrical bills and gas bills on some kind of a long-term contract. All of our electric bills are on a long-term contract, except there was a group that weren't. And these are 14 traffic signals that we were paying full rate on, and they qualify for a lower rate. So we're literally going to save a third going forward. So $10,000 to $12,000 a year just on traffic signals alone, with lighting. And then the dusk to dawn lighting, we're going to save another about $1,000 on 18 little accounts. And in 2 weeks, I'll be back with $100,000 worth of savings on the gas bill. Because we're paying 10 cents more per therm than we should be. And we buy 1.2 million therms. So anyway, so that's what we're working on.
Thank you very much, Ann. And Mr. Jury.
Yeah, and why were we paying so much before? I mean, what was the difference? Then I'd like to see the proof of the pudding, if you will, in a report. You know.
Well, you have it here. What happened, from what I can tell, these 18 or 14 and then the other ones, 18 accounts were never put under any kind of contracts. We were just paying full ComEd rates. We're just going on, some we were paying tax on, state sales tax. And as far as the gas bill, the gas accounts, I think there's 17 of them. We're locked into a long-term plan with Constellation that we can't do anything about. It was locked in a few years ago. But the last 2 winters have been extremely low, so gas is at an all-time low. And so that's why I want to lock in, starting for April 1st, going forward for the next 3 years.
Thank you for your good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. Thank you, Ann. Amanda had a quick comment.
Yes, Mr. Jury, this is, I believe I mentioned to you that similar to what happened in Public Works tonight, we will similarly be bringing this gas proposition to a pre-board meeting, operations meeting for the same purpose, and we'll have the pre-materials to you ahead of that.
Thank you, Amanda. Mr. Salgado.
Yes, I was wondering if we could maybe get an explanation on the motor fuel tax, how that works, how that's appropriated. I know that the finance brought this up, a couple items that were appropriated, and I know there was discussion by Mr. Schultz in relations to Joe answered the question that they were already appropriated. So from the fuel tax. So I would like to see if there was kind of a process of how that gets appropriated and obviously dished out to different departments to dig into those funds. So I think a little bit more clarification, not right now, but in the near future, a presentation of some sort, just to get us an idea of how that appropriation all works together.
We can make that happen. Thank you, Mr. Salgado. We'll make a note of that to follow up on an MFT overview discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Next item of business, Public Safety Committee, Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report this evening.
No unfinished business and no new business. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Webster, a second by Mr. Jury. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Have a great